Thank you, Amy, and oh, should I? I understand. And thank you to the Film Society for having us here. We are especially thrilled to be debuting this film at the New York Film Festival because this film is at its heart a story about two New Yorkers. One of them was an immigrant who came here and authored modern society as we know it. The other is a native son who once wrote a song called "The Garbage Pail Kids Are in Town." But he is the young man sitting right, where is he? He's right over there. A young man with a very promising career in musical theater, Lin-Manuel Miranda. And the only reason this film exists is because 3 years ago when I asked Lin if I could tag along with him as he started writing some songs and bring a camera, he said yes. This film was enabled by him, and it only exists because of his generosity and his openness. So thank you, Lin. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And I hope you enjoy. Stick around, because afterwards, as you can tell, we're going to have some interesting people on here to talk about the film and about Hamilton. Thank you.
Yes. Please welcome back Alex and yes. Well, when I introduced this, I said almost as exuberant as the show, I'll take away the almost.
Oh, thank you.
I just have one or two questions. When you started making this film, you had no idea where you were going with it, right?
I knew that it would follow the life of Alexander Hamilton. Mm-hmm. I didn't know where Lin was going to go. He'd only just written a few songs, as he told me at that time. I think you were still thinking concept album, musical.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was yet.
I said, I don't care, it doesn't matter, because whatever it is, it's you telling the story of Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah.
So everything that came was an incredible bonus. The hit of the show, a trip to the White House, we'll take it. But at its core, it's just the life of Alexander Hamilton.
My big question, I think I'd rather open this up, but one question. There are like so many strands in this documentary that you have to keep going. You have to keep going the history strand. You have to keep going the relationship to the original text, to the stage performance, to the development of the stage performance. How long did it take you to edit this?
A little while. We filmed for about over 3 years. We captured nearly 100 hours. The film is about 82 minutes long. So a lot left, and as you pointed out, there are all these different threads. There's a man in the audience named Brett Mason, who is an editor of the highest caliber. And I'm an editor. My background is in editing, and Brett and I have been in the trenches together. So from the beginning, we knew that there were going to be all these strands. And as long as we kept Hamilton's life as that core, everything else would just kind of go around it. The whirlwind of Lin's ride on Hamilton, the musical, we would just take as it came and try to find those moments where it paralleled Hamilton's life. A good example is we won the war, we made it to Broadway, we've opened, that sort of thing. We just try to find those moments where we could connect and throw back and forth.
Let's take it open for questions. Is there a mic out there? No, there isn't. So talk up.
There's a
Who
mic
has a
over there.
mic? Okay, so in the middle down here, I'll make your life difficult. Like in the fourth row in the middle? Yeah.
While we're waiting for a microphone to get to the middle of the house, I wanted to just clarify for the record that Renée spits fire.
Renee's an incredible freestyler.
Unbelievable.
There's actually, there was a moment during Right Hand Man where Renee and I would freestyle every night. as George Washington was going, "Can I be real a second for just a millisecond?" It's actually one of the only times we were backstage together. So we would always freestyle, and she's really good.
Yeah, but he is, I mean, so yeah, I'm better than that. But, but I mean, I'm better than that. But when they asked me, you know, he was kind enough to ask me, Renee, are you comfortable with this being in the movie? And my first response was yes, because this is clearly, you know, clearly there's so much brilliance in this work, but so much that's brilliant comes out of him just in the moment, and it's never written down. And so I got to be close enough to hear him say the craziest, mind-blowing things that no one would ever hear. He would, like, sometimes I would try to, like, sneak my phone backstage so I could record some of his freestyles. And so I'm grateful that at least one of them lives forever in this documentary.
They were not appropriate for PBS. Most of them.
Yeah. Who's got the mic? Okay.
My question is, why did you choose a white person to play the king when you chose like black and Latino people to play like all the other major roles?
Jonathan Groff is
question.
white?
Good question.
Didn't want to tell you.
He lied to me.
Turns out. That's a fantastic question. The answer is Jonathan Groff, and the answer is Brian Darcy James. Honestly, it wasn't always that way. In fact, in a lot of our workshops, it was played by a person of color. Actually, Josh Henry, who is playing Aaron Burr in Chicago right now, was one of our workshop Burrs, and that part has always sort of floated around. But it does sort of add kind of an interesting layer. It does add a bit of distance. But that being said, we're always just trying to cast the best person for the part. And so, the character is played by a Caucasian actor now, but it could change. It has been, it changes from production to production. Great question.
Yeah, on the very end over here.
Thank you, Alex. This is wonderful. I want to also thank Renee and your father. I'm Art Shrayan from My New York High. Thanks to Renee and her father, I got the ticket to see the play. And thank you because watching the play changed my life. So, Ellen, what Hamilton has been for you, probably you are going to be for me. Amazing. I read the book after that and saw this. It's beyond amazing. Thank you so much. You will be that person.
Thank you.
And I'm sure there are many people like that.
Thank you. That's very sweet.
My question is, going through this journey as an artist and watching this and everything for you in Hamilton, I chose this country. I'm an immigrant. I came here and I decided to make this my home. And everything that's going on right now, I sometimes question it. So what do you think, where we are right now? What do you think after working as an artist, an immigrant's journey, like an immigrant's America, where are we right now? Because I know you're also very active in about everything that's going on. What's your thought as an artist, as an immigrant? How do we live through it and still do something and make something of your life?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you for asking it. It's, one of the things there are two things that are very recognizable in the show that I think resonate in 2016. One, Lafayette and Hamilton, two guys who came here from other countries, slapping each other five, being like, look at where we are. Look at what we've made of a life in this new country. That's part of our American narrative, is that people come here from other places and help make this country great. The other thing, which you see in Act 2, is Jefferson, Madison, and Burr singing, this immigrant isn't somebody we chose. This immigrant's keeping us all on our toes. It's almost an epithet. And that's another part of our history. And both things can be true. There is a long tradition of using the word immigrant as an epithet of distrust of the latest group of people who have gotten here. And it is a very easy thing to do for a politician, and it happens every 20 years or so. It usually happens around an election cycle, where you point at the people who got here most recently and say, they're the reason you don't have a job. And 'Twas ever thus happened with the Irish at the turn of the 19th century. It's happening with Mexican Americans right now. And this is about as virulent a form of this virus as I've seen in my lifetime. We have to survive it. And if it bothers you, vote.
I would like the historians, yes, vote. I was just going to say, I would like the historian's perspective on the same question.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. From the time that the show started at the Public Theater back in January 2015, you know, the show was so much greater a sensation than any of us could possibly anticipated that reporters kept asking us, what is this whole Hamilton phenomenon about? And I found myself, one of the answers was, I said, you know, at the time that Barack Obama was elected in 2008, 40% of all Americans being born in this country, being born to people who identified themselves as African American, Asian American, Latino, or biracial. That number is projected to rise to 50% by 2040. So by 2040, the minorities in this country will become the majority. And what I said to the reporters is, I think that people come into the theater, I think they see this extraordinary young multiracial cast, and they see the changing face of America. The show is really kind of celebrating, you know, this changing dynamic, changing demographic. Then suddenly started watching the Republican debates. Forgive me for being partisan for the moment, but I realized that everything that I was celebrating in these interviews and everything that, you know, Lin and company had been, you know, celebrating in the show, those same things were bothering a lot of people in the country. And this is kind of, I think, the power of art in terms, because we met in 2008, so this show was really 7 years in the making, and yet it anticipated in so many ways so many of the issues. And, you know, the other thing is, I think that it has a very, in a way, complex view of the founding era, that these people were so brilliant and creative and admirable on the one hand, and on the other hand, we see that they could be very malicious and partisan. So we're seeing a period of American history that's so much greater than anything that we're seeing now, but we also can see a lot of the roots for what's happening today and how dangerous it is when that kind of partisanship gets out of control.
My question is, what advice would you give to future playwriters like me?
Start right now.
Yeah, I have.
Start
I have
right
a
now.
few. I have
Not
a
right
few
now in
on
the
Google.
theater, but start today and don't stop. I started writing plays in 9th grade. They were pretty crummy. I started writing musicals in 11th grade. They were pretty crummy. But that being said, I had the really good fortune of going to a school that did theater, where theater was an extracurricular activity, and that was sort of where I found who I was. And there are outlets for that. If you're a young writer, there are outlets for your writing. Get started now, so that by the time you are, I don't know when, but you get good. You go from bad to good. And one of the things you have to do to be a good writer is be a great reader. Read everything you can, see as much as you can. We are around the corner from the New York Performing Arts Library, where if you fill out a nice piece of paper, you can see a lot of Broadway shows. And I don't think a lot of people know about that resource, but it's an incredible one. And you live in New York, the greatest city in the world. You have such an advantage. Read a lot and write a lot. And when you see something you love, ask yourself why. And when you see something you hate, don't unplug, don't turn it off, ask yourself why. And that's how you form your taste. And that's how you sort of figure out the kind of writing you want to make. And that's the only way you become an artist. So start. Thank you. And don't stop.
Hi. First of all, thank you for Hamilton, and thank you for this. I didn't expect to cry during this, but I did, so thank you. My question is, you talk a lot about how the show was 7 years in the making, it took you so long to write it. When do you know when to stop tweaking? And I guess same thing to Mr. Chernow and Alex. When do you know when you're done with your project?
Tommy Kail tells me. Seriously? That's my answer.
PBS gave us an air date.
PBS gave him an air date. that's the best thing about deadlines. You know, people say, oh, now you have absolute freedom. Absolute freedom is terrifying to me. Deadlines I love. Restrictions I love. I like sonnets. I like haiku. I like a form so that I know what I'm working in. And so the deadlines were really incredibly useful, and it's always, I think Tommy is probably the best person in the world at setting a deadline that's just out of reach to make you work extra hard to reach it, whether it's we're doing a concert at Lincoln Center and you have 2 songs and you're going to have 13 in 6 months. That was the first deadline he set for me. And to us moving from off-Broadway to Broadway, you know, we got those crazy reviews, as you saw in the doc, and everyone said, move right now. The conventional wisdom was, you have the momentum. If you wait, no one's going to remember you in a year. Ride the wave of hype right now. But Tommy and I knew we have a list of 20 things we didn't finish before we opened off-Broadway. And so we knew that we had a better version of the show in our heads than the one off-Broadway. And if we had moved that season, we would have had to basically present the off-Broadway opening night production on Broadway. And we knew we could do better. So that's an instance of Tommy Kail sort of moving the goalpost and saying, we will open this summer, we'll sell tickets soon so that people don't freak out, and we'll go. So Tommy Kail really gets the lion's share of the credit for letting me know when I'm done.
Down here. Yeah.
Thank you for all of this. It's incredible. My question was that why did you decide to portray Burr the way you did when, as you put it, he's often the villain?
Well, I think Leslie actually speaks to that more eloquently than I possibly could. You know, Aaron Burr is defined by his worst act on his worst day. That's all we know about him. I didn't know he was brilliant. I knew he was the guy who shot Hamilton before I picked up Ron's book, and before I did a ton of research. You know, Aaron Burr was one of the earliest feminists in America. He gave his daughter an education that was even greater than most men. He was ahead of the curve in New York when it came to the rights of African Americans in this country and slaves. He was a part of the manumission to society that helped ban the importation of slaves in New York City. And he was a brilliant lawyer, and there's a lot about him. He's complicated. At the same time, there's a ton we don't know about Aaron Burr, because unlike Hamilton, he didn't like to write down his opinion a whole lot. Most of what we know is from his letters to his daughter. And you know, one of the things that you only know if you dig deeper into Hamilton and Burr's life after seeing the show is that song Dear Theodosia, where Hamilton and Burr are singing to their children, you're gonna be the future. Hamilton and Burr both survived their children. Philip died in a duel, and Theodosia died at sea on her way home to her father. So they both experienced that particular heartbreak as well. So to me, they're twins, and one killed the other. But at the same time, we are more than, you know, Leslie just said it perfect. We are more than our worst act, and I wanted to get as much of it as possible. Also, Aaron Burr's descendant was my next door neighbor at my last apartment in Inwood, and I didn't want him to be mad at me in my building.
That's right. I want to throw out one tidbit here, a little historical fact we didn't get in there on the note of Aaron Burr. Mariah Reynolds of the Reynolds-Hamilton affair got a divorce from James Reynolds later in life. Her divorce lawyer was Aaron Burr.
Isn't that crazy?
Just want to blow your mind with that.
Aren't you mad at me for not fitting that in the show?
But you brought up something with Aaron Burr about what we didn't know about Aaron Burr, and that brings up, to my mind, I thought so much of that about the ladies in this piece. Angelica Schuyler emerges from your show, and just scratch the surface of it in our film as kind of, forgive my language, like the biggest badass of them all. This is a woman who I think is finally getting a biography, I heard. So my question, Renee, is like, there isn't enough of a paper trail for a woman as extraordinary as Angelica. So where do you start?
There's so much. There's actually some things about Angelica in Hamilton that aren't exactly accurate, but like feed the actor so richly, and that was so compelling to me and so useful for me. So what I had with Ron Chernow's book was this portrait of this woman who was so, as they say, comfortable in a parlor as she was in a stateroom. I mean, she was on either side of the water, just a badass, basically. And that was really helpful to figure out who she was, but how she acted in the story and how to make that woman compelling. I really loved the dramatic elements that Lin added to the story, just in terms of the timing of her marriage, which is something that was strategically altered to make a character that could actually win a Tony. Basically, that's really important to know, because he was, in this wonderful conversation with Sondheim, you had to talk about how to do two things, how to be. I just think one testament to the choices that were made by him and this team were to keep him on and have that person that kept him, legal, and then also to allow himself to be the dramatist that he is, which is so helpful to the actor. That's why this is such a generous piece for us. To play. So yeah, I absolutely love that. I also think it's a testament to his wife and his mother and all the people. I could talk forever. I'm going to be very specific and just pick one thing to say about women in this production, and that's really just talking about Lin as a writer. When I first was exposed to this piece, we were at 52nd Street. It's called 52nd Street Project, right? Yeah. It's right on 52nd Street. It was before the off-Broadway run, and we were just sitting in chairs singing the music. And at the time, Lin was not a father. Clearly, he's not a woman. Do you know what I mean? There are things that he wrote about, and I think at that particular moment, I was the only person in the cast that was a parent. And I remember them, him singing, Leslie and Lin singing Dear Theodosia. I remember the moment he sang about the way he decided to write about the death of a son. And I just couldn't believe that somebody who hadn't actually experienced something personally could find such a distilled and perfect way to talk about it. And that's how I feel about his portrayal of women in this particular show. It takes a lot for him to say, this is so easily a play about men. And on the surface, you might think that, but it is not. And I feel that Angelica, what's so special about her is that she's the only person that knows in the beginning of the show that the answer to the question that is asked throughout the piece, who lives, who dies, who tells your story, is Eliza. I feel like the only person that sees her through the entire show, even Eliza herself doesn't know. I feel like in that last moment, Angelica does it, and I think that's the reason why Lin is quoted as saying that Angelica is the smartest person in the show. And I will also add, even though I'm talking a lot, that he also says, and I think Ron Chernow has said to me, that if a woman could have been president at that time, Angelica Schuyler would have been president, which is what's so exciting to me about the moment we live in right now. And he does not shy away from that in this show. And one of the corrections that he made when waiting to go to Broadway was that line that you added for Angelica in Take a Break, when you basically made her the answer to the debt crisis.
Oh yeah.
You have to
do you want to share that with them?
Oh sure. I mean the reference she's making to the thing I changed is, Angelica was married by the time Hamilton met the Schuylers, but that's not interesting. And two, Angelica and Eliza did have brothers, but I am a big fan of Jane Austen, and I'm a big fan of girls with no brothers who have to figure out how to make their way in the world at a time when they were not allowed to do so. And so taking away the brothers allows me to talk about that, allows her to talk about the roles, the only roles she is allowed to play as a woman at this time in our history. So I got rid of the brothers, and I made her single.
He let me have a toast at a wedding. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
As a single, as the oldest sister who is not married, marrying off her younger sister to the man that she loves, that she met at the exact same moment. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And made a choice in an instant. I mean, like, what better food for an actor to have? And it's generous that way throughout every character in the play. it's the reason why we had the most Tony nominations and competed with each other, so we all didn't get to win one. Do you know what I mean? It's just the testament to a really generous writer.
And the thing she's referring to in Act 2 is there's a song called Take a Break where Hamilton is at home, his wife is downstairs teaching Philip his lessons while he's writing a letter to Angelica upstairs. And Angelica responds because she, in real life, knew Jefferson. They were writing letters back and forth in Europe while they were both there together. So instead of just being like love letters between the two, let's show how Hamilton and Angelica are the intellectual sort of like sparring partners. And Angelica's like, I know Jefferson. You got to talk to Jefferson. It's the only way this is going to happen. And so in a way, I sort of imbue her with the knowledge that's going to get Hamilton to the compromise he's going to do in Room Where It Happens.
But she does it holding a parasol. Because
Sunday in the Park with George.
Yeah, no, and also because that's really, but also because he's that guy. But also because a woman would have to say that holding a parasol. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Which is a really, you can say the thing that solves the equation, but you say it twisting a parasol.
Yeah. But Ron, I think that one of the great triumphs of the show is really the portrayal of the three women, all three brilliantly drawn by Lin and brilliantly portrayed in the original Broadway cast by Renée and Jasmine Cephas-Jones and Philippa Sue. And if you look at the three women, I always thought that the three women in the show and the three women in Hamilton's life, Eliza, Angelica, and Mariah Reynolds, they form a kind of composite portrait of Hamilton. Because Eliza is the purity and the goodness and the deep sense of principle that you see in Hamilton's life. Angelica is the beauty, the sophistication, the elegance. He's only saying that because I'm sitting here. She's one of my favorites. And then Mariah Reynolds is the kind of sensuality and the temptation to flirt with danger and kind of the darker side of his nature. And so I think it's so powerful in the show that each of the three women brings out a completely different side in Hamilton. I think the fact, and it's wonderfully captured by Alex. I have to say, Alex, this is such a brilliant show. I think that it deserved a brilliant documentary, which is really what you've given it. And I think especially important, since this is a show, of and about history, how wonderful that we have this magnificent historical record of our historical show. So I feel you've performed
I want to give
service.
props to Joanne Freeman, who's in the doc, who's also here.
Joanne,
Hi, Joanne, who taught me everything I know about dueling and writing about it.
And who has my favorite line in the movie when she calls Hamilton an asshole. Oh, I love that. When do we hear people speak that frankly about our founders? That's great. I want to know what you would call the other founders.
We have time for one or two more. Oh, yeah.
Right here.
Down
We've
here,
got a mic.
Who's got a mic?
We do.
Okay.
Okay, we have two questions. So, Lin, where did your love from reading and writing come from?
Where did my love for reading and writing come from? It came from the man literally sitting in front of you, Luis Miranda, and the woman next to him, Luis Miranda, my mother. They're both here. That was an easy one. What's the next question?
How do you think you changed from In the Heights to Hamilton?
How do I think I've changed? Besides my hair, I think that that's a great question.
I see the bags under his eyes in the movie.
Yeah, the bags under my eyes have grown considerably. I also, I think everything you write is an opportunity to learn something. In the Heights was everything I knew about writing musicals, and that opened when I was 28 years old. The next musical I worked on was called Bring It On, and I wrote it with other composers, and she saw it. And I learned an enormous amount by working with other songwriters like Tom Kitt and Amanda Green and Jeff Whitty, because Broadway is like not a great investment. One out of 5 shows on Broadway makes their money back. So you can't be in it for like, I'm gonna make a ton of money. Like, you probably won't. But hopefully you learn something in the process and you become a better writer over the course of making your thing. And that's sort of the only thing I use to choose projects. So Hamilton is everything I know about writing musicals right now. I hope to learn more on the next project and put that in the next one. Yes, sir, with the other mic.
Hi, my name is Peter. This is so cool. Okay. First, I just want to thank you for being here and thank you for creating something so wonderful and magical. I genuinely mean that. It's so inspiring and it's probably one of my favorite things ever. Before I ask my question, I have to apologize to Ron Chernow because my father's a history teacher, and in high school he tried to get me to read your biography, and I was like, no. And then when I started, I was like, Dad, I've been listening to this musical Hamilton. Can I borrow your biography? And he's like, oh, well. So my question to you is, so I'm 19, and 19 seems to be a very pivotal age, I suppose, especially for Alexander Hamilton. So I'm curious, if you could go back in time and tell your 19-year-old self something, what would that be?
This may be the best question I've ever gotten. Thank you very much.
I met you when you were 19.
You met me? That's right. We met when we were 19.
Or 18.
We were both trying to be film majors. You succeeded, I failed.
Right.
And went into theater instead. And I started writing in the Heights when I was 19 years old. And a couple of things were happening at the same time. One, I really should have broken up with my high school girlfriend, and I hadn't yet. She went to study abroad. And the long distance thing was really hard, and I had all this time and angst, and I didn't know what to do with it, and so I started writing in the Heights, but to fill the time. You played the dad in my first read-through of it.
I was the first Kevin at the first read-through.
We're stricter about the Latino casting
Yeah.
now
I did it with a Yiddish accent.
than we were at 19. And but if I could go back and tell that guy anything, it would say, one, keep writing, and two, like, you're gonna survive this. When you're 19, or when you are around your age in your teens, you are feeling more feelings than you will ever feel again in your life. And everything is life or death, and everything is the biggest deal in the world. And I promise you there's another side to it. You get to the other side of these waves that are of emotion that are crashing. And I was as giddy and as depressed as I've ever been at 19, and I channeled it all sort of into my writing. But if I could go back, I would tell that kid, it's gonna turn out okay. One day you're going to be on a stage with these incredible people. There's going to be a movie about your show. It's going to be on PBS, and an awesome 19-year-old will ask you an awesome question. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you all.
Thank you out there.